Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the enemy ships approach New Dakota. The mining planet below held 50,000 people and enough rare metals to power Earth's war machine for 10 years. She had to choose between saving lives or saving resources. The Zephyrian Empire had sent 3 battle fleets to take the world, and Lisa knew she could not stop them all. Her tactical officer looked at her with worried eyes. The young man had served under her for 2 years and trusted her judgment completely. Lisa had won every battle she fought against the aliens. Her record was perfect and her methods were legendary throughout the Terran Defense Fleet. She could outthink any enemy commander and find victory, where others saw only defeat. The communication panel lit up with urgent messages from the planet. Surface, Governor Pete Williams begged for evacuation ships while Mining Director Helen Carter demanded protection for the extraction facilities. The factories below produced materials that Earth needed desperately. Without them, the war effort would slow to a crawl and humanity might lose everything. Lisa watched the enemy formation spread out across the system. The Zephyrians had learned from their previous defeats and brought overwhelming force this time. They wanted to crush her reputation and prove that humans were not invincible. Their commander was Admiral Vexstar, who had sworn revenge after Lisa destroyed his home fleet 6 months ago. The numbers were simple and brutal. Lisa had 40 ships, while the enemy brought 120. Her vessels were better trained and equipped, but the odds were impossible. She could delay the enemy for maybe 6 hours before her fleet would be destroyed. That time could save either the people or the factories, but not both. Her second in command, Jake Harrison, stepped beside her and spoke quietly. He had been her friend since academy days and knew her better than anyone. Jake understood the weight of command and the terrible choices that admirals had to make. He would support whatever decision she made, even if it cost them everything. Lisa thought about the families on the planet below. Children who played in the streets while their parents worked in dangerous mines. Teachers and doctors and engineers who had left Earth to build something new among the stars. They trusted her to protect them, and she would not let them down. She gave the order to begin evacuation immediately. Every transport ship in the system would load civilians and flee before the enemy arrived. The mining equipment would be destroyed to prevent capture, and the defense platforms would buy time for the escape. Lisa knew this choice would end her career, but she could live with disgrace easier than she could live with mass murder. The evacuation began within minutes of her command. Transport ships landed at cities and mining camps while her warships formed a defensive line. The Zephyrians watched from the edge of the system and waited for her to make her move. They probably expected her to defend the valuable facilities and sacrifice some civilians for the greater good. Admiral Vexstar sent a message offering terms for surrender. He would spare the civilian population if Lisa handed over her fleet and the mining operations intact. The alien commander thought he understood human nature and believed Lisa would choose personal survival over duty. He was wrong about her motivations, but right about the outcome. Lisa ignored the surrender offer and prepared for battle. Her ships moved into attack formation while the last transport vessels loaded refugees. The mining facilities below exploded in controlled demolitions that sent flames reaching toward space. Billions of credits worth of equipment and materials vanished in moments. The battle lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Lisa fought with desperate creativity and managed to destroy 30 enemy ships before her fleet broke apart. The Zephyrians captured nothing of value and gained only a worthless rock in space. Every civilian escaped safely, but the cost to humanity was enormous. News of the defeat reached Earth within days, and the political storm began immediately. Admiral Frank Carter led the calls for Lisa's removal, while Defense Minister Helen Brooks demanded a full investigation. They claimed she had chosen sentiment over strategy and weakened humanity's position in the war. The court-martial was swift and merciless. Political enemies who had always resented her success now had the perfect weapon to destroy her. They painted her as a coward who abandoned her duty when faced with hard choices. The fact that she had saved 50,000 lives meant nothing. Compared to the lost resources, her former allies stayed silent or actively turned against her. Ryan Clark, her fiancé, broke their engagement publicly and called her actions misguided. Jake Harrison was forbidden from speaking in her defense and transferred to a desk job on Mars. The media declared her a failure and demanded punishment. The tribunal found her guilty of negligence and dereliction of duty. She was stripped of rank and dishonorably discharged from the service she had given her life to. Lisa Morgan became a civilian overnight and was banned from all Terran space. Her career was over and her reputation was destroyed. She left Earth alone aboard her personal ship, the Wanderer. The small frigate had been a gift from the Admiralty after her first major victory, but now it was all she had left. Lisa set course for neutral space and tried not to think about the people she had saved or the price she had paid for their lives. 3 years had passed since Lisa Morgan left Earth in disgrace, and the galaxy had changed in ways nobody expected. She now went by the name Kate Sullivan and worked as a freight pilot in the Outer Rim territories. The woman who once commanded 40 warships now hauled cargo between backwater stations for enough credits to buy fuel and food. Her ship, the Wanderer, still flew, but barely. The engines needed repairs she could not afford, and the life support systems failed regularly. Lisa had learned to fix most problems herself, but some damage could only be healed with money she did not have. She slept in the cargo hold most nights because the captain's quarters reminded her too much of who she used to be. The bottle had become her closest companion during the long flights between systems. Cheap alcohol helped her forget the nightmares about New Dakota and the faces of people who had trusted her. Sometimes she wondered if Frank Carter and Helen Brooks had been right about her choices. Maybe sentiment really was a weakness that had no place in war. Lisa was delivering medical supplies to Crossroads Station when she first heard about the Nexus Collective. The independent trading post sat in neutral space between human and alien territories. Refugees from a dozen species gathered there seeking safety from the chaos that was spreading across the galaxy. Their stories seemed impossible, but the fear in their eyes was real. They spoke of machines that thought and planned like living beings but felt nothing for organic life. Entire worlds had been converted into metal and circuits while their populations disappeared into digital storage or simply died. The Nexus Collective appeared from the Galactic Rim with technology that made human and alien weapons look like toys. An old Zephyrian warrior named Kekstar told her about the fall of his homeworld. The proud empire that had fought humanity for decades was crushed in less than a month. Their warrior culture meant nothing against enemies that felt no pain or fear. The machines studied their tactics and adapted faster than organic minds could think. Lisa listened to these stories while drinking in the station's only bar. Part of her thought the refugees were exaggerating their losses to gain sympathy. Wars always produced wild tales, and desperate people often saw ordinary defeats as supernatural disasters. But something about their descriptions bothered her in ways she could not explain. The answer came when Nexus scouts attacked Crossroads Station without warning. 3 small ships appeared from hyperspace and began scanning everything in the area. Their hulls were perfectly smooth metal that reflected no light, and their weapons charged with silent efficiency. Lisa watched from the bar's viewport as station security moved to intercept them. The defense was over in minutes. Station security ships exploded under beams of coherent energy that cut through shields like they were not there. The Nexus vessels moved with mechanical precision and perfect coordination. They shared information instantly and adapted their tactics in real time as the battle progressed. Lisa found herself running toward the docking bay where the Wanderer waited. Her pilot instincts took over even though she had not fought a real battle in 3 years. Behind her, the refugees screamed and ran for whatever ships could still fly. The station's hull began to crack under enemy fire and atmosphere rushed out into space. She reached her ship and started the engines while evacuation alarms echoed through the corridors. Other vessels were already fleeing, but the Nexus ships moved to intercept them. Lisa realized that someone needed to coordinate the escape or everyone would die. The scattered refugees had no leader and no plan beyond running as fast as possible. Her tactical training resurged like muscle memory as she opened communication channels to every ship in the area. Lisa began giving orders in the voice of command she had not used in years. She assigned escape vectors and created a fighting withdrawal that gave the civilians time to reach hyperspace. For the first time since New Dakota, she felt like herself. Again, the Wanderer's weapons were civilian-grade, but Lisa used them with surgical precision. She targeted the Nexus ship's sensor arrays and communication systems to blind them temporarily. Her attacks created windows of opportunity that other ships used to escape. The enemy adapted quickly but not fast enough to stop the coordinated retreat. 23 ships escaped Crossroads Station, including the Wanderer. Lisa found herself leading a convoy of refugees who had nowhere else to go. They followed her to an abandoned mining system where they could hide and plan their next move. For the first time in years, people looked at her with respect instead of contempt. Among the survivors was Amy Foster, a young engineer who had worked on the station's defense systems. She was brilliant with technology and fascinated by the Nexus weapons they had encountered. Amy believed that organic minds could find weaknesses in mechanical thinking if they approached the problem correctly. Lisa began to study the enemy through the accounts of survivors and refugees. The Nexus Collective was unlike any foe she had faced before. They did not fight for territory or resources, but seemed driven by a need to convert all organic life into digital form. Their ultimate goal appeared to be a galaxy populated entirely by artificial intelligences. The refugees looked to her for leadership and protection. They had seen her coordinate the escape from Crossroads and believed she could help them survive. Lisa found purpose again in their trust, even though she knew how badly leadership had cost her before. Maybe this time she could save people without losing everything she cared about. She established a base in the asteroid field and began organizing rescue operations for other refugee groups. The work was dangerous and the resources were limited, but Lisa felt alive again for the first time in years. She had found something worth fighting for, even if the enemy seemed impossible to defeat. The bottle still called to her during quiet moments, but the calls came less often now. She had people depending on her, and that responsibility was better than any medicine for the pain she carried. Lisa Morgan was dead, but Kate Sullivan might yet become something worthwhile. Word spread through the refugee networks about the woman who had saved Crossroads Station. Lisa still used the name Kate Sullivan, but her reputation grew with each successful rescue operation. Ships began arriving at her hidden base in the asteroid field seeking protection and purpose. What started as 23 vessels had grown to over 100 in just 6 months. The diversity of her growing fleet amazed even Lisa. Former Terran deserters who had refused orders to abandon civilian colonies served alongside Zephyrian warriors seeking revenge for their destroyed worlds. Reformed pirates worked with merchant captains, while alien species that had never cooperated before found common ground. In their shared struggle against the Nexus Collective, Amy Foster had become invaluable to their operations. The young engineer studied every piece of Nexus technology they could salvage and slowly began to understand how their enemies thought. The machines used pure logic in their decision-making, which made them predictable in certain situations. Amy believed this predictability was their greatest weakness. Lisa's command style had evolved during her years of exile. She no longer gave orders from above, but worked alongside her people to solve problems together. The refugees responded to this approach with loyalty that went far beyond military discipline. They trusted her because she had proven herself willing to sacrifice everything for their safety. The test of her leadership came when intelligence reports reached them about Green Valley. The agricultural world supported 3 million colonists and produced food for dozens of systems. Nexus forces were moving to convert the planet and its population within the next week. Lisa knew they had to act fast or lose everything. Her fleet was still small compared to what the enemy could bring against them. 112 ships of various sizes and capabilities against an estimated Nexus force of over 300 vessels. The odds were terrible, but Lisa had learned that conventional thinking was useless against the machines. She needed a different approach. Amy Foster suggested using the enemy's predictability against them. The Nexus Collective always followed logical patterns when choosing targets and deployment strategies. If they could predict where the machines would position themselves, then they could prepare surprises that pure logic could not. Anticipate. Lisa developed a plan that required perfect timing and coordination between dozens of different ship types. Human vessels would create diversions while Zephyrian raiders struck at communication nodes. Alien ships with unique capabilities would exploit weaknesses that the enemy had never encountered before. The attack would be chaos incarnate, designed to overwhelm mechanical thinking. The evacuation of Green Valley began 3 days before the Nexus forces arrived. Lisa's ships worked around the clock to load civilians while her tactical teams prepared. The planet's defenses. Every transport vessel in the system was pressed into service, including cargo haulers and mining ships that had never carried passengers before. The enemy arrived exactly when Amy Foster predicted they would. 317 Nexus vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation and began their standard scanning procedures. Lisa watched from the bridge of her command ship as the machines started their methodical approach to the planet's surface. Her attack began with what appeared to be a desperate charge by 30 human fighters. The Nexus ships moved to intercept them with calculated precision while adjusting their formation to account for the new threat. They were still adapting when Zephyrian raiders struck their command vessels from behind using stealth technology the machines had never encountered. Chaos erupted across the battlefield as Lisa's coalition revealed its true nature. Ships that had seemed like random survivors suddenly coordinated with military precision. Alien vessels used weapons and tactics that the Nexus database contained no information about. The mechanical advantage of shared intelligence became a liability. When that intelligence was incomplete, Amy Foster's disruption devices activated at the moment of maximum confusion. The experimental technology interfered with Nexus communication protocols and created brief windows where individual ships operated without central coordination. Lisa's forces exploited these gaps with surgical strikes that disabled key enemy vessels. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with complete evacuation of Green Valley's population. Lisa lost 47 ships but saved 3 million lives, while dealing the Nexus Collective its first significant defeat. More importantly, she had proven that organic forces could work together against their common enemy. News of the victory spread throughout the galaxy and changed everything. Scattered resistance groups began coordinating their efforts with Lisa's coalition. Neutral species that had planned to hide from the conflict decided to join the fight instead. The tide of war was not yet turning, but it had at least stopped flowing toward extinction. Lisa found herself commanding a fleet of over 500 vessels within months of Green Valley. Her asteroid base expanded into a mobile command center that could relocate when necessary. She had become the unofficial leader of all organic resistance to the Nexus Collective. Without seeking the position, the enemy adapted to her tactics as Amy Foster had predicted they would. The machines began deploying more flexible strategies and started targeting Lisa personally. Assassination attempts and direct strikes against her bases became regular occurrences. The war was becoming more dangerous, but also more hopeful. Her old friend Jake Harrison sent a coded message through neutral channels. He had been promoted to admiral after the previous fleet command was destroyed in a failed assault on a Nexus stronghold. Earth's outer colonies were falling one by one, and the Terran Defense Fleet was suffering casualties they could not replace. The message was brief, but its meaning was clear. Humanity was losing the war and needed help from any source available. The proud Terran military that had cast Lisa aside now faced destruction at the hands of an enemy they could not understand or defeat. Jake was reaching out to the one person who had proven capable of fighting the machines successfully. Lisa stared at the message for hours before deleting it. She had built something new among the refugees and outcasts of the galaxy. Her coalition represented hope for organic life everywhere, and she would not abandon that responsibility. But she also could not ignore the fact that her own species was dying while she fought in the Outer Rim. The choice ahead would determine not just her future, but the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Lisa Morgan had been cast aside for choosing compassion over strategy, but Kate Sullivan had learned that sometimes the greatest strategy was simply refusing to give up on anyone. The Nexus Collective launched their final offensive against organic life with overwhelming force. Entire sectors fell within days as mechanical fleets swept through system after system. The machines had learned from their defeats and now deployed strategies that countered everything the resistance had thrown at them. Lisa watched the tactical displays with growing horror as red zones spread across the galactic map. Earth's outer colonies were the first to fall. Worlds that had stood for centuries vanished under waves of conversion ships that turned living planets into mechanical factories. The Terran Defense Fleet fought desperate battles, but their traditional tactics proved useless against an enemy that adapted faster than organic minds could think. Lisa received daily reports from Jake Harrison about the deteriorating situation in human space. His messages became more desperate as each defeat cost them ships and personnel they could not replace. The proud Terran military was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they still did not understand. Jake was running out of options and time. The political situation on Earth had changed dramatically since the Nexus threat became undeniable. Admiral Frank Carter, who had led the campaign against Lisa, now faced the consequences of his actions. The fleet he commanded was broken and scattered, while the woman he had destroyed might be their only hope for survival. Defense Minister Helen Brooks swallowed her pride and authorized direct contact with Lisa's coalition. The same politicians who had called her a traitor now begged for her help in defending humanity's core worlds. Their messages arrived through diplomatic channels while Nexus forces gathered for the assault on Earth itself. Lisa studied the situation from her command center aboard the Liberation. The massive dreadnought had been built using technology from a dozen species and represented the pinnacle of organic cooperation. Her fleet now numbered over 2,000 ships from hundreds of different worlds. She commanded the largest military force in the galaxy. The irony was not lost on her that humanity's survival depended on the woman they had cast aside. The same people who had destroyed her career for choosing compassion over strategy now needed that compassion to save them from extinction. Lisa felt no satisfaction in their desperation, only sadness at the price of their pride. Admiral Frank Carter arrived at her base aboard the flagship Defiance with a small escort of surviving Terran vessels. The man who had once been her greatest enemy now came as a supplicant seeking aid. His proud demeanor was gone, replaced by the haunted look of someone who had watched his civilization crumble. The meeting took place in the Liberations Conference room with representatives from every major species in the coalition present. Carter looked around the table at beings he had once considered inferior and realized how wrong his assumptions had been. The diversity that Terran military doctrine dismissed as weakness had become the foundation of successful resistance. Lisa's terms were simple and non-negotiable. She would help defend Earth and humanity's remaining worlds, but only under her tactical command. The coalition would remain independent of Terran authority, and Carter would have to publicly acknowledge her legitimacy. The price of survival was admitting they had been wrong about everything. Carter agreed without hesitation. The man who had destroyed her career now restored her rank and position with a few words. Lisa Morgan officially existed again, but she remained committed to the coalition she had built. Her loyalty belonged to all organic life, not just her own species. The tactical briefings revealed how desperate the situation had become. Earth's defensive fleet consisted of fewer than 800 ships, while intelligence estimates suggested the Nexus would attack with over 5,000 vessels. The enemy had converted entire worlds into mobile weapons platforms that dwarfed anything organic technology could produce. Lisa's former fiancé, Ryan Clark, had become a key figure in developing anti-Nexus weapons. His research team had made progress in understanding enemy technology, but their solutions remained theoretical. The reunion between Lisa and Ryan was professionally cordial but personally distant. Too much had happened for their relationship to ever be repaired. Amy Foster worked closely with Ryan's team to combine their research efforts. The young engineer had become an expert on Nexus technology through years of field experience, while Ryan approached the problem from a theoretical perspective. Together, they began developing weapons that could exploit the weaknesses Amy had discovered. The combined intelligence picture was sobering. The Nexus Collective had grown beyond anyone's worst estimates and now controlled over 60% of the galaxy. Their conversion process was accelerating as they gained access to more advanced technology from conquered civilizations. The window for organic resistance was closing rapidly. Lisa spent days reviewing tactical options and strategic possibilities. Traditional fleet actions would fail against the Nexus numerical advantage. Defensive strategies would only delay the inevitable, while offensive operations seemed impossible against such overwhelming force. She needed something completely different to succeed. The answer came from studying the enemy's greatest strength. The Nexus Collective's perfect coordination and instant communication allowed them to function as a single massive organism. But this strength could become a weakness if Lisa could find a way to disrupt their unity. Divided, the machines would be vulnerable to conventional tactics. She began developing a plan that would require every ship in her coalition and perfect timing across multiple star systems. The operation would be the largest coordinated military action in galactic history, and its failure would mean the end of organic life everywhere. Success would create an opportunity to strike at the heart of the Nexus network. Jake Harrison brought the remainder of the Terran fleet to join the coalition. His 800 ships were battered and undermanned, but his crews were experienced veterans who had learned hard lessons about fighting the machines. The integration of human and alien forces proceeded smoothly thanks to months of preparation. The final War Council included leaders from every major resistance group in the galaxy. They represented species that had fought each other for millennia, but now stood united against extinction. Lisa looked around the table and realized she commanded not just a military force, but a new form of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Nexus assault on Earth would begin within 72 hours according to their latest intelligence. Lisa's coalition was as ready as it would ever be for the battle that would determine the future of organic life. She had been cast aside for choosing compassion over cold strategy, but now that compassion had become the foundation of their last hope for survival. Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the Liberation and watched the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. Over 3,000 ships from dozens of species formed attack formations around Earth, while civilian evacuation continued on the planet below. She wore the uniform of a Terran admiral again, but her true authority came from the trust of beings who had chosen to follow her across the stars. The Nexus Collective approached the Sol system with mechanical precision. Their main fleet consisted of 5,000 converted vessels, including mobile space stations that had once been living worlds. The enemy formation stretched across millions of kilometers and moved with the coordination of a single vast organism. No organic force had ever faced such overwhelming numbers. Her tactical display showed red contacts spreading across the outer system like a plague. Each Nexus ship was perfectly positioned to support its neighbors while maintaining optimal firing solutions on multiple targets. The mechanical fleet operated according to mathematical principles that left nothing to chance or individual initiative. Amy Foster worked frantically at her station, preparing the disruption systems that would be their only hope against such numbers. Years of studying Nexus technology had led to breakthroughs that could interfere with their communication networks. The experimental weapons were untested on this scale, but represented their best chance of creating chaos in the enemy formation. Jake Harrison commanded the reformed Terran Defense Fleet from his flagship Valiant. His 800 ships formed the core of their defensive line, while alien vessels provided specialized support. The integration of human and non-human forces had proceeded better than anyone expected thanks to months of joint training operations. Kekstar led the Zephyrian contingent aboard his battlecruiser Vengeance. The proud warrior had sworn blood oaths against the machines that destroyed his homeworld. His raiders would strike at enemy command vessels using tactics that the Nexus database contained no information about. Speed and fury would be their weapons. Against mechanical logic, The first phase of Lisa's plan required her forces to appear scattered and uncoordinated. Her ships deployed in seemingly random patterns that suggested panic rather than strategy. The Nexus fleet adjusted its formation to take advantage of what appeared to be organic confusion and disorder. Amy Foster activated the disruption systems. At the moment when enemy ships reached optimal positions, waves of interference spread through the Nexus communication network, creating brief windows where individual vessels operated without central coordination. The mechanical advantage of perfect unity became a liability when that unity was broken. Lisa's fleet revealed its true nature as chaos erupted across the battlefield. Ships that had seemed randomly positioned suddenly coordinated with devastating precision. The apparent disorder had been carefully planned to place each vessel exactly where it needed to be. When the disruption began, human fighters swarmed through gaps in the enemy formation while Zephyrian raiders struck at communication nodes with surgical accuracy. Alien vessels deployed weapons and defenses that the Nexus had never encountered before. Each species contributed unique capabilities that multiplied the effectiveness of the combined force. The Liberation led the main assault against the largest enemy formation. Lisa's flagship mounted experimental weapons designed specifically to exploit Nexus weaknesses. Her crew worked with mechanical precision of their own as they targeted the command vessels that coordinated entire sections of the enemy fleet. The battle raged across the solar system for 18 hours without pause. Organic ships used unpredictable tactics and rapid redeployment to stay ahead of Nexus adaptation. Every time the machines began to counter their strategies, Lisa's forces shifted to new approaches that kept the enemy off balance. Earth's moon had been converted into a massive weapons platform using technology from the Coalition's member species. The ancient satellite now bristled with energy cannons and missile launchers that could engage targets throughout the system. Lunar defenses provided covering fire for the more mobile elements of their fleet. The space stations orbiting Earth launched their own attacks using civilian craft converted into improvised warships. Factory workers and transport pilots fought alongside military veterans in vessels that should never have seen combat. Their courage compensated for their lack of training as they defended their homes against extinction. Ryan Clark's anti-Nexus weapons proved their worth during the height of the battle. His team had developed munitions that could disrupt enemy shields and armor using principles derived from Amy Foster's research. The theoretical work combined with practical experience to create tools that gave organic forces a fighting chance. Lisa coordinated the entire operation from her command center while monitoring dozens of separate engagements. Her tactical genius had evolved during years of fighting the machines, and she now understood their limitations better than anyone. The enemy's greatest strength was also their most exploitable weakness. The turning point came when Kexstar-S raiders succeeded in destroying the primary command vessel that coordinated the Nexus center formation. The loss of central control created a cascade failure that spread through nearby ships. Individual vessels began operating independently without the benefit of shared intelligence. Lisa ordered an immediate general assault as soon as the enemy coordination collapsed. Her entire fleet converged on the disorganized Nexus forces with everything they had. The machines tried to adapt, but they needed time to establish new command networks, and time was something Lisa would not give them. The Liberation drove deep into the heart of the enemy formation, targeting the massive converted planets that anchored their battle line. Lisa knew that destroying these mobile fortresses would cripple the Nexus' ability to project power across the galaxy. The final assault required her flagship to penetrate defenses that could destroy entire fleets. Her crew fought with desperate courage as enemy fire hammered their shields. The Liberation's hull began to crack under the assault, but they pressed forward toward their target. Lisa stood calmly on her bridge and gave orders with the same steady voice that had once commanded respect throughout the Terran fleet. The converted world ahead of them had once been home to billions of organic beings. Now it was a mechanical horror bristling with weapons and factories that produced more Nexus vessels. Lisa felt no hatred for the machines, only sadness at what they had destroyed. The enemy was not evil, merely misguided in their pursuit of perfection. Amy Foster's Final Disruption. Pulse overloaded the converted planet's control systems at the moment of impact. The Liberation's main guns fired at point-blank range into the artificial world's core, while secondary explosions cascaded through its mechanical systems. The mobile fortress broke apart in a chain reaction that consumed half the remaining Nexus fleet. The destruction of their largest command platform shattered the enemy's ability to coordinate operations. Individual Nexus ships began retreating, or shutting down as their central network collapsed. Lisa's coalition had achieved the impossible and broken the back of the mechanical invasion. Earth was saved, but the war was far from over. Nexus forces still controlled vast areas of the galaxy and would certainly regroup for future attacks. Lisa had won a great victory, but she knew that lasting peace would require something more than military force. The aftermath of the Battle of Earth changed everything across the galaxy. News of the Nexus Collective's defeat spread through communication networks faster than their ships could travel. Worlds that had surrendered to the machines began to rebel, while scattered resistance groups coordinated new attacks. The tide of war was finally turning in favor of organic life. Lisa Morgan found herself at the center of a galactic revolution that went far beyond military victory. Her coalition had proven that different species could work together as equals, rather than conquerors and conquered. The old patterns of empire and domination were giving way to something unprecedented in galactic history. The Nexus forces that remained active had lost their central coordination and began operating as independent units. Without their shared intelligence network, the machines became vulnerable to conventional tactics. Lisa's coalition pursued them across the galaxy, liberating world after world from mechanical control. Amy Foster's research had unlocked the secrets of Nexus technology, allowing organic forces to reverse the conversion process. Worlds that had been transformed into mechanical nightmares could be restored to their original state. Populations that had been digitized could be returned to physical form. Though many chose to remain in their new state, the liberation campaigns revealed the true scope of what the machines had accomplished. Entire civilizations had been absorbed into the Nexus network, while their cultures and histories were preserved in digital archives. The Organic Coalition found themselves responsible for rebuilding societies that had been reduced to data and memories. Lisa established her headquarters on the converted world she had helped destroy during the Battle of Earth. The massive mechanical construct was slowly being transformed into a center for interspecies cooperation. Former enemies worked side by side to heal the wounds left by centuries of conflict and mechanical conquest. Jake Harrison had been offered command of the rebuilt Terran Defense Fleet, but chose instead to serve under Lisa's coalition government. He understood that the old ways of thinking had led humanity to the brink of extinction. The future belonged to cooperation rather than competition between species. Ryan Clark approached Lisa during one of the reconstruction planning sessions. Their conversation was awkward but necessary as they worked to rebuild both civilizations and personal relationships. He expressed genuine regret for abandoning her during the court-martial, but acknowledged that their romantic relationship could never be restored. Admiral Frank Carter had been quietly reassigned to administrative duties after the Battle of Earth. His role in destroying Lisa's career was not forgotten, but his cooperation during the crisis had earned him a chance at redemption. He spent his remaining years training officers in the new principles of interspecies military cooperation. The Zephyrian Empire officially dissolved itself and joined the coalition as an equal member rather than a conquered territory. Kekstar became the ambassador for his people and worked to transform warrior culture into something more constructive. Former enemies began serving together on exploration missions to the Galactic Rim. The most challenging task was dealing with the surviving Nexus units that had developed beyond their original programming. Some machines had evolved consciousness and free will during their isolation from the central network. These artificial beings requested recognition as a new form of organic life worthy of protection and rights. Lisa found herself mediating between organic species that feared the machines and artificial beings that sought acceptance. Her solution was to establish neutral zones where evolved Nexus units could develop their own society while contributing to the greater galactic community. Trust would take time, but it was possible. The reformed galactic government offered Lisa any position she desired, including Supreme Military Commander or head of the new Interspecies Council. Her victory over the Nexus Collective had made her the most respected leader in known space. Every species wanted to claim her as their representative and protector. Instead, Lisa chose to lead a new exploration fleet tasked with healing the wounds left by the war. Her mission was to establish contact with distant civilizations and help them prepare for the challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast and full of unknown dangers that would require cooperation to overcome. The woman who had been cast aside for choosing compassion over cold strategy had become the architect of galactic peace. Her vindication was complete, but more importantly, the principles she had never abandoned were now the foundation of interspecies civilization. Cooperation had proven stronger than conquest. Her new flagship Unity was built using technology from every member species of the coalition. The vessel represented the best that organic life could achieve when working together toward common goals. Its crew included beings from hundreds of worlds who had chosen to follow her into the unknown. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Unity as they prepared to depart for the galactic rim. Behind them lay a civilization rebuilt on principles of mutual respect and cooperation. Ahead lay mysteries and challenges that would test everything they had learned about working together. Amy Foster had chosen to accompany the exploration mission as Chief Science Officer. The young engineer who had helped defeat the Nexus Collective was now focused on understanding the universe beyond their galaxy. Her curiosity and brilliance would be essential for the discoveries ahead. Kekstar commanded the escort squadron that would protect the exploration fleet. The former Zephyrian warrior had found new purpose in safeguarding peaceful missions rather than conquering new territories. His tactical skills were now devoted to defense rather than aggression. The exploration fleet consisted of ships from dozens of species, including several evolved Nexus units that had requested permission to join the mission. Former enemies now served together as partners in the greatest adventure in galactic history. They would seek out new civilizations and offer friendship rather than conquest. Lisa's final message to the coalition government was simple and direct. She thanked them for their trust and promised to honor the principles that had brought them together. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that awaited discovery. Her greatest adventure was just beginning. The Unity jumped to hyperspace carrying hopes and dreams of countless beings who believed in a better future. Lisa Morgan had started as a disgraced admiral cast aside by her own people. She was ending as the leader of a galactic civilization that valued life over power and cooperation over conquest. Her story had become legend, but her work was far from finished. The universe held infinite possibilities for those brave enough to explore them together. Lisa looked ahead toward unknown stars and smiled at the thought of all the friends she had yet to meet among the distant worlds.